nobody ever gets canceled for being too woke. So you can say the craziest thing, like men can have babies, and then nobody will, even though people are thinking, well, that's kind of nuts, nobody will say it. They'll just fall in line. Yeah, exactly. That's what I've always thought, men can have babies, sure. I saw a dude who was glowing yesterday, you know. I mean, and that's the problem.
And it's totally insane.
Cowardice.
Yes, it is. It's moral cowardice, isn't it?
It's intellectual cowardice.
But it also comes from a place of reality, that fear, because they see people around them literally getting cancelled, getting shamed and abused and hounded out of jobs. And they think, I don't want it to happen.
Yes, because we hadn't then grown into the persons we would become. And humanity writ large is just the collective version of that. Did Columbus commit atrocities? Of course. But people back then were generally atrocious.
Bill Maher isn't new to controversy. For decades, he was Hollywood's loudest progressive voice, cheering liberal wins, roasting conservatives, and riding the culture war wave. But lately, he flipped the script. The guy who once carried the left's banner is now torching the very movement he helped fuel. And he's not whispering. He's dragging the woke left into the spotlight and setting it on fire. Here's the twist. Maher isn't some conservative pundit trying to score points. He's one of them. That's why when he says the left has lost its mind, it cuts deeper. His words hit like betrayal, not debate. And that sting, that's why the woke crowd is panicking. Cancel culture, historical erasure, Hollywood hypocrisy, even Trump. Maher's flamethrower is aimed at everyone, including his old allies. And the more they try to dismiss him, the bigger his audience grows. Because he's saying what millions whisper, the left's obsession with purity is eating itself alive. This isn't just a rant, it's a warning shot.
I can't count the number of stories I've either covered on the show or just read about of professors at colleges, which are supposed to be the bastions of free speech, who said something that was just an opinion.
One guy,
that was
one
different.
professor in America, he gave a lecture for 25 years about the use of offensive language. And then some students complained about his use of offensive language in the lecture about offensive language. And he had to lose his job. And at that point, I just felt that was peak woke insanity. He literally was lecturing about offensive language and using offensive language to illustrate it.
They have no sense of nuance. They have no sense of context. They just know certain buzzwords or certain concepts are out of limit, off limits. And since social media is just a bunch of mean girls.
Maher isn't exposing hypocrisy. He's exposing cracks in the foundation of modern liberalism. For years, Bill Maher was the left's sharpest weapon. Sarcastic, blunt, fearless. If you were liberal, he was your guy. But then something shifted. He didn't join Republicans. He simply looked around and realized the mob he once cheered on now looked just like the thing it claimed to hate. Comedy stopped being truth-telling. It became marching orders. Jokes were policed, conversation censored, dissent treated as betrayal. Maher built his career on questioning authority. And suddenly, his own side became the authority. So he pumped the brakes. Hard.
This is what's so obnoxious about that side of things, that just idea of we're not really lifting people up. Liberalism is about lifting people up, not catching people.
And tolerating people.
It's not about white self-loathing.
Yes.
It's about, yes, we have a horrible history in this country. Let's make it right in the ways that make sense. It's not just about catching people.
The backlash was instant. Fans who once adored him screamed, "Sell out." Conservative. But Maher didn't move right. The left sprinted left. That's why he suddenly looked like a heretic. And where did he first draw the line? History itself. Maher calls it presentism, judging the past by the standards of today. Sounds harmless, right? Until you realize how absurd it is. Expecting a villager in 1525 to have the same worldview as a 2025 Twitter activist with Wi-Fi, smartphones, and TikTok morality, that's not justice. That's arrogance. Yet statues fall. Jefferson, Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt. Whole legacies reduced to one flaw.
So I think that really is kind of the center of the country. Old school liberalism, take a victory lap. You kind of won on a lot of things, but it's another funny pathology of liberals. They don't want to acknowledge progress. Because they somehow feel like if I acknowledge progress, well, then I'm not as authentic a progressive. It's right in your name. And that's what you're selling, progress.
Well, of course.
Maher calls it vandalism disguised as morality. Because if you erase the ugly chapters, you erase the progress too. Take slavery. Was it evil? Absolutely. But it wasn't an American invention. It was everywhere. Rome, Africa, the Middle East. To pretend it began in 1619 is propaganda, not education. His point is brutal. You can't judge George Washington as if he was tweeting from an iPhone. Rewrite the past, and the same mob will come for the present. And the present, it's even worse. Maher hammers this constantly. Nobody ever gets canceled for being too woke. You can say something as wild as, men can have babies, and people nod along. Why? Fear. They've seen it. Professors losing jobs for quoting offensive words. In lectures about offensive words. Comedians chopping up routines because one tweet could end them. Entire shows rewritten to satisfy Twitter mobs. That's not progress. That's cowardice. Worse, it's intellectual cowardice. The refusal to even ask questions. People echo slogans they don't believe just to survive. And Maher says it plain. When fear replaces thought, society stops thinking critically. And where does fear spread fastest? Social media, the mob's favorite arena.
Everybody who could afford one had a slave, including people of color. The way people talk about slavery these days, you'd think it was a uniquely American thing that we invented in 1619. But slavery throughout history has been the rule, not the exception. The Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Greeks, Romans, the Arabs, British, the early Americans, all the way up through R. Kelly.
Maher's message is simple. You can acknowledge the horrors of the past without erasing the people who shaped the present.
Maher compares Twitter to a gladiator pit, not debate, blood sport. The goal isn't truth, it's humiliation. And it's not just online, it's leaking into real life. Friendships collapse, families fracture, dating apps, forget it. One wrong answer on politics and boom. Check please, that's not politics, that's tribal warfare. This, Maher says, is the opposite of old school liberalism. Liberalism used to mean tolerance, debate, lifting people up. Now, it's catching mistakes, shaming people, and flexing moral superiority for retweets. And the irony, while the mob tears down strangers online, they accidentally handed their biggest enemy the ultimate weapon, Donald Trump. Maher despises Trump, always has. But his harshest shots lately, they're aimed at Trump's enemies, the endless indictments, the Stormy Daniels case. The Democrats thought they were burying him. Maher warned, no, you're resurrecting him. And he was right. To millions, Trump didn't look guilty. He looked like a martyr. Meanwhile, MSNBC threw victory parties every time a charge dropped. But outside the bubble, Trump was suddenly the underdog fighting the system. Instead of disappearing, he became the most talked about man in America. Again, Maher's take, you can't put out a fire with gasoline. The left made Trump stronger. And while politics burned, Hollywood wasn't safe either. Maher loves mocking Hollywood. He points out films from just 15 years ago, made by liberal icons, would be shredded today. Not because the stories were bad, but because they didn't check diversity boxes. Back then, Oscar-worthy. Today, cancel-worthy. To Maher, this is creativity's death. Characters aren't written to serve the story anymore. They're shoved in to satisfy a checklist. Whole scenes exist just to scream, look how progressive we are. That's not art, that's propaganda. And the irony, the directors being roasted are the same ones who once pushed liberal culture forward. Now their own side is burning them alive. Audiences can smell it too. They don't want lectures in costume. They want stories. And when Hollywood forgets that, people tune out. But if movies can't survive the purity test, what chance does America's history have? Maher drops the hammer here. Slavery, yes, it was brutal. But no, America didn't invent it. The Egyptians, Romans, Africans, the British, every empire used it. The difference? America fought to end it, and pretending otherwise erases progress. He calls it insane that in a country where women run Fortune 500 companies, where civil rights expanded massively in 70 years, activists still scream America is worse than North Korea. Why? Because if they admit progress, they lose outrage. And without outrage, they lose power. His punchline, judging George Washington as if he was tweeting from 2025 isn't history, it's arrogance. And without context, you can't understand progress. Without progress, you can't protect it. Maher's crusade isn't about turning conservative, it's about sanity. He's saying, you can admit ugly truths without erasing heroes. You can fight for equality without silencing free speech. You can demand change without turning the country into a minefield where one wrong word ends your life. The left sprinted so far toward purity that they abandoned tolerance and debate, the very values they once stood for. Now they're terrified of admitting victory, because if progress exists, the outrage machine runs out of fuel. And here's the warning. If fear and arrogance keep running the show, we all lose. Free speech dies. Creativity collapses. Progress stalls. Maher's not trying to kill liberalism. He's trying to save it from itself. So the real question isn't why Bill Maher is speaking out. The real question is, why isn't everyone else?